I did this talk, I think a couple months ago now. It was during October. So I ended up drawing these slides with some silliness of, the Halloween spirit and whatnot. Kind of inspired from Jacob Thornton's talk on open source, which was many, many years ago now. Wow. But if you get a chance, definitely check that talk out because yeah, I don't know. It just kind of inspired me to start drawing slides. So this is the Winter Wonderland edition though. So I kind of added some, winter niceness here and there and sprinkle that around. So this is testing an SRE. So applying a testing mindset to operations problems. And then just some brief about me. I did co-found the Austin Automation Professionals meetup. We've got a bunch of people in that meetup. It's a lot of fun. We do at least, a meeting once a month. We also have a YouTube channel as well. And that's primarily on quality, but we have had some ops talks in the past as well. I collect super old Magic cards, and now I collect super old Pokemon cards. So that's a thing. I love animals, computers, all of these things, music as well. So just getting right into this, as well as you can find me around the internet. So multiple places. I do YouTube and all of those things. So really just diving into it with some context. So at the current organization that I'm at, just within our small organization, we are SRE, but we also build and own the infrastructure. And, I just wanted to kind of give everyone the context of the organization because, this really differs per organization. Some people could be focused entirely on, responding to alerts. Some people could be DevOps. And then, this organization waved a magical wand and now they're SREs, but they're still doing DevOps work. Some folks could be focused on SLAs, SLOs, SLIs, and these things. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past year and a half or so. So previously I was responsible for testing and eventually introduced automated test organization. So how I did that originally, it was Ruby. So that was like 2017, I think 2016. So then I switched over to Python and PyTest and Selenium. So I definitely wanted to give a shout out to the Selenium guidebook by Dave Heffner, really for allowing me to easily implement the above for my team, because that helped out quite a bit. So there was not an enormous amount of information with using PyTest with Selenium. Mozilla was doing it, and I was kind of like, as like the sole person trying to push for automation across the teams. These were my resources. That and Meetup, really. I was like kind of learning from a lot of people from, these resources, as well as like some local shops like HomeAway at the time. I believe they rebranded to Verbo, but some folks over there were really cool and just kind of taught me a lot of this stuff. So it's always nice. We have, another thing I wanted to do is shout out to Selenium Base, because they really kind of made adopting Selenium, Python, and PyTest a lot easier. So if you get a chance, I would definitely check that project out on GitHub. I'm kind of flowing along here. So what I wanted to do is kind of review the context-driven approach to making decisions, really from an ops perspective. So kind of like a thing here that I've been doing, and these are all things that I've done over the past year and a half, is kind of understanding like as to why, we're even adding more infrastructure to begin with. Some ops teams that I've talked to, some SRE teams that I've talked to, maybe they're tasked with something like they need to scale out RabbitMQ or something to that effect. There's multiple ways to do this, but I really kind of the thing that I've been doing, especially because we're such a small team, is looking to adopt managed services. Another example of that would be like, rolling Kubernetes, for example. In this case, a lot of people would look to a public cloud as I did, and I looked for the managed solution. At the time, it was Google Kubernetes Engine, and now we're using EKS. But just something to keep in mind, like really asking why, from like that testing perspective, like, why something is doing, why would we focus efforts on this versus that? And that's really helped me out, over the past year and a half or so. Another piece here from context approach was, you don't have to use Terraform because everyone else is. Other options exist, such as Pulumi and CloudFormation, and it's ideal to avoid this the fragmentation of tooling and all of these things. But at the end of the day, just because you Google something like infrastructure as code, and that's the first result that comes up. You really want to use something in the context of how you want to use it best and how it fits your context. Another piece here is definitely like, just because you heard about something on Twitter, it doesn't mean you need to immediately implement it as well. That's an issue that I have, because I see all these cool things, and being on a smaller team, we really have to do laser focus. So I don't know, something that's helped me quite a bit. I get in the evenings, like looking at Rust language and looking at eBPF and these things, just rather shiny things that sometimes you just need to focus on getting something done based on the current context. Another piece here, really testing your network connections, and really that comes from a security perspective. So a fairly recent example, October-ish, is maybe that Bastion host should have actually had a restricted IP range. So that's something that we did. We deployed some infrastructure that we needed for something oddly enough security related, and I had noted that it was this accessible host that really shouldn't have been. We should have restricted that IP range, and we did. But that's something to keep in mind, because that's that was an access point to something that was supposedly secure and hidden behind private infrastructure. So a lot of this comes down to using or writing automated tests to test this for you. So in this case, you could use something as simple as curl, or nmap, scanning that particular network, and then curling to see if you can get requests through. So that's something to keep in mind there. And then really what it comes down to is if you deployed something, whether it's a K8s cluster or it's infrastructure, whatever that might be, what can you actually dig up? What can you find there? And then one of the pieces here is eliminating risk aversion at the inception of a project. So this is flying Santa or flying snow person, whatever this is. I meant to draw a Santa hat, and then it ended up becoming this snow creature. So yeah, basically, experimenting with, kind of a brittle setup sooner rather than later. And I mean, really, like what this comes down to is experimenting with, a setup sooner rather than later. So I guess an example of this from what I had recently worked on was, Vault instance. We required a HashiCorp Vault for various reasons of security, really locking down our secrets. I mean, that's the purpose of using something like that. And you have you deploy this nice, highly available cluster, and once it's there and once it's actually actively being used, in a production environment or in a production state in some way, it becomes really, really difficult to run those experiments on this nice infrastructure, because you have this fear of destroying something essentially. So that's I don't know, that's just like one of those realities that we face, whether it's I guess whether it's code or whether it's infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, really, what I did was I went in there and turned off some instances to really showcase and prove out that this was highly available. If I took a node out, would that workload automatically go over to the next node? And how long was that downtime for? So that's something, ideally, you want to do earlier on. There are ways to do this on existing infrastructure, of course, but yeah, you want to do that iteratively and slowly. So that goes into attempting to introduce chaos engineering earlier in the project, and I'll talk a bit about that later on. So another piece here is, this is like, honestly, I think out of all of these, this is probably one of the biggest ones. This is something a lot of people, a lot of testers can relate to as well. I mean, really, it's just avoiding flaky tests, and with the infrastructure piece and the SRE piece, especially the SRE piece, is just avoiding that unnecessary alerting. So an example of that, as a lot of you have a test suite, and sometimes you have a lot of these tests, and sometimes those tests fail. For us, it was a matter of a test failing, going into work the next morning, and then digging in and trying to determine why that test actually failed. So in our case, there is I think there was a Selenium conference talk on this, I think it's 2016, that time frame, by Brett Pitticore. Definitely check that one out, because he had discussed the idea of just removing the test entirely as well, as opposed to constantly iterating this test, or you keep rewriting this test so that it passes. If it's a test that's consistently failing, I would for me particularly, what I took from that talk was kind of identifying what that test means from a business perspective. A lot of the tests that I ended up writing, or checks, whatever you want to call them, because I know some people have they call them something else, but whatever you want to do with those, I deleted these, right? So I either deleted them, or getting back to it, I had a very selective amount of tests. So these would focus on business critical aspects of the organization. In our case, at the current company that I'm at, it would be a seller going to the website and getting an offer on their vehicle. So that was a big deal. So yeah, those were tests we would constantly ensure these were up. If something was if a test alerted us to an issue, we would identify it and try to resolve it as quickly as possible and see what issue, if it caught a regression or whatever. But if there was a test that would consistently fail, delete it. I just, one of those things, I would delete it and remove it potentially if there was documentation on it, because documenting all those tests, the tests themselves, in my opinion, should have been the documentation, at least to the team. And then, if there's a failure, there'd be a link to that specific test that failed. So, the entire team can get involved, as opposed to just, the test engineers. So yeah, I mean, the idea, and kind of taking that to the SRE world, is, we would get alerts on, when I first started working in this space, we would get a lot of alerts, a lot of alerts that wouldn't mean anything. And I just, it just got to the point where I was constantly asking them what do we do about this? What do we do about this? And oftentimes, there would be nothing done about a particular alert. So, there's a term for that, alert fatigue. And, there's a really good book. It's a quick read, and it's Practical Monitoring. It's, I think, O'Reilly published it, but it's definitely a book to check out, because it taught me a lot about, delete those alerts. If there's too many, what are you doing? I want all of these alerts to ultimately be actionable. And, oddly enough, that's something I'm working on right now. And, really that noise equates to, people ignoring them, and the more critical alerts you actually add, will people actually respond to these? So it's shockingly a fairly common issue across organizations. And I kind of took the same approach, and just we went in there and we were set up meetings and reviewed what we actually needed and what we didn't need, and removed the ones that we ultimately did not need. And that's still an ongoing process, of course. This is an iteration over the next couple of months. So I guess the other thing here, and I this is something I learned from charity majors, and too many dashboards are a bad idea. And really what this comes down to is, we used to have these dashboards throughout the office, and they served a really, really good purpose. They would kind of identify some infrastructure stats and these things. But if there's too many of these dashboards, especially like if you're using something like New Relic or Datadog or Honeycomb or whatever you're using, for us, because we're such a we're like a small to medium sized team, who's actually looking at these dashboards, and like realistically, like why would somebody spend the time to look at them all the time, right? So automate this so nobody has to watch a screen all day. And that was like one of the main takeaways I got. And that equates to an alert. So that's even if there's an issue with the system, sure, you can have some like core dashboards up and you could kind of review these and identify those issues as needed. But for us, it's alerts, an actionable alert. So we get alerted to something, we respond to it. Or ideally, we would, there's this buzzword AI ops. What does it actually mean? But we have enough data from our systems, and we have enough observability in our systems, right? So that we can kind of understand if there's going to be an issue prior to it actually happening. That'd be ideal. That's ideal, and that's something I'm working on at the moment. So, and again, like most of us don't need to know that the CPU spiked to 50% on one of these worker nodes. Or like even worse, right? Like these thresholds. This is something I'm resolving, and like there might be an alert that kicks off. For an example, one of our systems, legacy system that we're using, Graylog. They have great querying, but it was originally set up so that it was like as a threshold. It was like if there's 20 errors within the time frame of 5 minutes, kick off an alert. And it's like, oh my, now, because now we have to dig through one system. So we have to dig through Graylog and kind of identify and put the puzzle together of, what actually went down. And then we have to switch over to another system, whatever that might be. For us at the moment, it's, it's a New Relic. And then, we have to look APM, and we have to identify if it's, was there an outage of some sort? Was it in synthetics or was it in browser, right? So yeah, I mean, that kind of equates to the observability of, really like there should be ideally, I guess, one place so that we can kind of resolve these issues and identify, root cause more quickly. So those are some big ones that, I have gotten, and I'm still learning / working on. So yeah, there's just some relatable ones, kind of to the test world. Some more here. Testing infrastructure as code, right? So, in the test space, infrastructure as code for us, I guess, I don't know, like a definition of this, like it's quite literally, it's, writing some kind of code to generate the infrastructure for us. And oftentimes, that's going to be Terraform, or it could be a public cloud specific markup language script. And that could be, CloudFormation, YAML, or JSON. And I know Google Cloud has their own equivalent of that as well. But oftentimes I'll see people using Terraform or Pulumi to really take advantage of, their multi-cloud setup and environment. And that's how, a lot of shops are either managing their infrastructure or trying to manage their infrastructure. And just kind of simplifies it and, makes it living documentation, which is kind of what I like. You don't have infrastructure and then you don't go into, some documentation system and write down, what you have, because ultimately that becomes technical debt. You have this infrastructure as code kind of living out there in a repository somewhere, securely, of course. And, it provides the context of what you actually have going on. So it's multiple. There's multiple ways that this helps us. Um, so yeah, and testing against that. If I an example of that would be I would say GKE, right? So I had a project in Google Kubernetes Engine where I had to build out a couple of clusters for us using GKE and Google Cloud. And ultimately, what I did is I manually went in there. So I guess it's kind of like manually going through a test, right? So it's like walking through a test, an exploratory test, and then kind of identifying areas of automation. So for me, I manually went through it through this UI, this Google Kubernetes Engine UI, and I built a cluster, and I kind of identified like, oh, I need this, and this. I need this many nodes. I need this to scale, and then kind of went back and rewrote that as Terraform, and prior to like anything production or anything like that, I tested this against in our case at the time it was GC projects, because these public clouds kind of handle the ideas and the concepts of like dev, staging, and production. So Google Cloud has this concept of projects, which is pretty awesome. It's really super convenient, made my life a lot easier. And AWS has accounts. So if anyone knows anything differently, or if you're doing this differently, let me know. So that'd be awesome. But by accounts, I mean, larger shops, based on what I've seen, will quite literally have like an account for dev, an account for staging, an account for production. We do not do that. So that's, but in any case, getting to the point here, I ran this Terraform against like a test, a test project, and that created this GKA cluster, and I could easily tear it down, without an experiment on it, and also learn Terraform a bit more as well, because I was still super new to that. So yeah, it really gave me peace of mind. And this environment, you could Google horror stories about infrastructure as code and maintaining these production workloads. So yeah, testing that is in my opinion enormous. It's a big deal. Another piece here, this is AWS. So is reviewing the CloudFormation templates in a diagram mode. So I really thought this was cool because you could have a CloudFormation template and you could actually review it within their diagram mode, and it gives you kind of like a visual representation of what you're actually going to build. So I thought for me that was super useful because I was using that for some HashiCorp Vault stuff. CloudFormation, the fragmentation piece there is we use that because it was much quicker for us to get something up and running. And prior to myself actually deploying that, I would test it in a way. First tested it in multiple test scenarios, right? But the other piece there was like actually reviewing it visually to see what it actually created. So that was, for me, that was super helpful. It kind of gave me like that visual testing piece there to kind of reconfirm my or reassure myself, I should say. And yeah, so there are other pieces there. For testing Terraform, you've and specifically like Terraform modules, you have items like TerraTest that you can test out all these modules, and to some degree unit test these things prior to actually deploying something. You could have an entire CI/CD process for this, which is pretty cool. There are other ways to do that. There's like Terraform Cloud now, and GitHub Actions, and there's some cool things that people are working on. I need to dive back into that space because I need to actually see if there's anything newer, which I'm sure there is. And then the other piece there is, of course, when you're doing infrastructure as code, review those infrastructure costs. For myself, I meet with the team, the entire team, to review these actual costs, our cloud spend, and why the bill went up 10 grand last month, and these kinds of things. And like these potential rogue instances of that were generated by some infrastructure as code. It's it's concerning. There's a lot of potential problems there. So yeah, when that's another big thing. It's testing in a sense, but I mean, really, I guess it's covering your butts. So, scrolling along here, we have some Cthulhu going on. So, really, it's breaking what you created with chaos engineering. It's an interesting thing, right? So, there are chaos engineering in general. I mean, it's kind of in fault tolerance, injecting problems into your system intentionally. So in our case, well, I mean, getting to it, there's lots of tools available to accomplish this. I can think the idea was potentially born out of Netflix. I know Netflix like super popularized this, and there's the Simian Army and a book on this, and lots of talks, and eventually a company, Gremlin, is the first one that comes to mind. But the ideas are, testing the high availability, this resiliency of your systems, et cetera, that you promised. Maybe you claimed that, in my case, our HashiCorp Vault instance is, it could handle major issues, right? 2 nodes can be knocked out, and it would still be available to our applications and our systems, and what the small amount of human users that we have on that system. So yeah, it's a matter of testing that out. For myself, this was initially done manually, and it was really a matter of curling that endpoint and then turning those instances off and seeing how long it took to actually switch over, and measuring that latency, or measuring the amount of time that it took to actually fail over. So these are all like ways that you can do chaos engineering. So really, if you have existing infrastructure and applications, you can start small. So what I mean by that is, on your dev instances, your dev environment. I don't know. Yeah, nobody should want to do this, on your production instances. But I don't know. Each environment can be differently, right? You have this argument of, only test in production, right? But I'm not entirely sure if that applies to, K8s clusters and these things. Correct me if I'm totally wrong on that, please. Yeah, and what all of this leads to is, of course, and this is like the fun stuff. Honestly, I personally believe, like, the idea of chaos engineering and these things, I think it's super cool. I think it's a lot of fun. There's really, it's an entire discipline. It's could be. I mean, I think there's entire roles that people hire for, that's just this. But if you're like myself on a small to medium-sized team, these are all things that you can do. And you could have, like a game day, they call it, with your other engineers and or your product folks, or whoever. Bring them in and show them, like, cause an intentional outage, cause a system outage on dev or staging, unless your production systems are hardened. And have some fun with it, right? So like that's something you could, even KPIs on this, and like turn it into like it's a big deal, right? Because you're truly proving out that, if an issue occurs, how do you go about it? What is that? What are the run books that you take in the past that you take? If you have ops folks and SRE folks at your organization, it's interesting to see, like, if they have run books right now, and how they handle an issue. If an alert comes in, how do you react to that? What's the specific scenario, right? And another piece that would be interesting as well, would be if there's some issue with latency, and it's supposedly resolved, inject that into your CI/CD potentially. Have a test, that's it's intentionally injecting a specific amount of latency, or or load, or whatever that might be, into your systems. And see what the outcomes are. Prove that out. If an issue occurs again, is it truly resolved? And that that all applies to these ideas of chaos engineering. And what this all comes down to is, ultimately, I mean, for me as an SRE, reduce your PagerDuty alerts. So, okay, woken up at night, or whatever system you use, right? It's Ops Genie. There's a lot of these out there. and restore confidence. That's a big deal. If there's all these outages and problems, you want to restore that confidence. Mistakes happen, problems happen, issues happen. It's just life. It's just what it is. So restore that confidence. Got some links. You can find me on GitHub, on Twitter, elsewhere, all over the internet. Just if you need me, I'm sure you can find me and ask more questions if you're not here live. And then here's some more drawings. Got some fun stuff. But yeah, basically just diving right into questions. If anyone has anything they want to talk about, or even if it's not related to this, even if it's not related to talk, like if you're a tester now, are you interested in taking that leap into the ops world or site reliability engineering world? Talk to me. What do you what's anyone interested in?
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Meredith.
I was about to say that I did not have a question exactly, but a comment. Besides, I mentioned that I'm currently learning how to be a front-end tester. And I'm learning how to be a front-end tester on a project where the collective set of devs are learning how to build a SaaS product. So this has been a very thought-provoking talk for me. I made a number of notes during the process. Oh, right, we haven't thought about that now, have we? Awesome. So thank you, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here. I mean, I wanted to say in the beginning, I appreciate all you being here. Just there's this constant barrage of events, and some of us are on Zoom all day as well. So like for anyone to get on this after work or or learning something or whatever you're doing, it's pretty cool. So I appreciate all of you.
So Evan, I had a few questions. These slides are awesome. I mean, this is the most creative slide deck I've ever seen, and I love this flowing format too. So it's like so creative. I love it.
Hi.
So there are two questions I have, and one of them is about, you talked about alerting, and I was wondering, do you follow any kind of patterns, the severity of the alert or urgency of the alerts? What works for you? What worked in your context? So that would be my first question. If I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So before, awesome question. I mean, before we were really alerting on like just everything. God, there's like so many things we were alerting on. Just I would probably say, I don't want to call anyone out at my organization or anyone there previously, but it seems as though a lot of it was just like defaults. So like just a bunch of default settings that weren't necessarily like automated, but so like an example here would be, maybe the site performance would be down like by very insignificant percentage, right? So that's just something like maybe some people need, but we didn't in our context. Our context was because we're such a small team. The ideal scenario for us would be like every alert we get would be something that we can do something about. So what I did was I went in there, and there's some obvious ones, right? There's like at least obvious to me, like maybe not to everyone else, but like for some of the things like CPU percentage, for us, there was an alert in there that I think it was like a CloudWatch alert too. It wasn't like, it was like this issue of like, if your company's been around for a while, you get this fragmentation of tooling. Like we've been around for, we're not a startup anymore. So we're growing as an organization. And as a result of that, over the past couple of years, we've used different tools. So getting to the point, CloudWatch had an alert set up on CPU of like, I think it was like 30% or something like that. So like every time someone would be running like a gray log query, basically checking logs, and it was a long query, the system was like, oh, good, oh goodness, like alert, alert. And I was like, oh, here we go again. So yeah, things like that. We just removed entirely. And to replace it, I would want something like, like 90% CPU. Different systems work differently. These were, and EC2 instances on AWS. It could be different for, EKS or, cloud native versus, just instances hanging out. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But for our concert at the time, yeah, we would alert on like higher CPU instances, occurrences and database usage, number of connection strings. If it was like insane, what can we do about that? We just need to be alert to kind of react to it, these kinds of things. Storage, I remember that was one thing, and that was just like more of like the ops side, right? And then there were like application issues. So outages was a big thing. Like identify not only your outages, but maybe you have a third party like API or something, create a synthetics monitor, alert on that. Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, or being notified, be aware of, maybe if you're in a lot of organizations do this now, like your applications are integrated in lots of third-party things. So alert on their endpoints, or check out their status page and include that within your outage process, or even take that a step further if you want to, if there's I wouldn't personally know how to automate this, but like a manual approach, like oftentimes I saw there was an issue with our application that relied on something third party. And then, we would have to check like Twitter, like, and then I would see some people having issues with this. And I was like, oh, I see. And their status page wouldn't, it wouldn't have been updated in time. So yeah, I guess that's some of it. And we alerted on what matters that we could react to versus like a lot of noise that didn't make any sense to us. And we're still working on that. That's a work in progress right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you ever used any other filtering mechanisms or anything like if this, then that, or any other services to, possibly filter some of that out? Or is that?
Not yet. I haven't seen that. I think that's something I'll check that out though. That's cool. How we do filtering and all of that is just really, right now it's within New Relic. So to be transparent, we're using at the moment Graylog in New Relic. We've been using these for a while, and within New Relic we're allowed to query on specific issues in the system, whether it's like a front end issue or whether it's like application performance or logging. I'm currently switching us over to a different logging service, so it's all going to be within New Relic 1, only because we're already on that. It'd be less training for a lot of people on the team. But there are lots of options for that. I mean, if for all of these observability things, check out honeycomb.io and, Prometheus and Grafana, and there's and for logging for cloud native, there's just so many options like FluentD, and a lot of things are out there to check out. And the larger the company, the more tooling they'll probably use. But because we're such a small-ish company, I wanted to get us on one platform. That was like the ideal goal for myself, and then kind of adopting for the team. But I hope that answered the question. We can dive into it, some more as well.
Thank you, Evan. That was really great. Anybody else has questions? I have more questions, but you go ahead. I don't want to.
I do have a quick one, if you don't mind. What was that book that you had mentioned about monitoring?
Sure. It's practical monitoring.
Practical monitoring. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it was like it's a fairly quick read, and it takes like an open source approach to a lot of this stuff, and it kind of like almost like a tooling like agnostic approach, which I thought was really nice. And it's like I said, it's a quick read, and I think it came out like 2018, like 2017, because I know the biggest issue I've had with tech books is like I get so excited and I buy a bunch of books and then like there's so much work I have to do, and then I get only a couple of these books read, and then it's like, oh my, this book is like out of date, technology.
I have the same issue, but I still can't resist the urge, especially when this one looks like it has a monitor lizard on the cover.
Yeah, that's part of why I love like those O'Reilly books. There's some really cool animals on there. The monitor lizard is really cool.
I'm one of those people that doesn't need a book to be paper. And so since I've kind of given that up, I tend to buy more books, but they're all living in my Kindle. So at least they're not crushing a bookshelf and killing a bunch of trees.
Yeah.
And
I
but the
just said
good
the
part
same
is
thing.
like sometimes I'll go into the Kindle and I'll say I'm looking for a thing, like a 2 or 3 words, and I'll just say search the Kindle. And sometimes like I had like 3 or 4 Jenkins books. I'm like,
Cool.
what if one of these books mentions this message I'm getting? And sure enough, I got a hit in one of the books, and it said, no, this can happen when you're setting these sorts of things up. So I got lucky. And instead
That's
of just
cool.
Google, where you just find something on like server fault, and it's like, here's some
Yeah.
suggestions. This was actually, it was in the book and it was quite detailed. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but I learned something else about Jenkins at the same time. It was like handling
That's neat.
threads or something like that. And so it's like I learned something, and I didn't have to have a bookshelf full, and I would have never found it if they were all just paper.
Yeah, I agree. The search capability is something that's helped me out a lot. And that's partially, part of why I switched over to digital as well. And then, just I've been moving like quite frequently over the past couple of years, and just like, there's tracking all of these books. They are so heavy.
Yes, yes, they are.
Evan, I have one more question that I was itching to ask you. Is that you talked about chaos engineering? So have you in your team done any of these game days or do these tabletop exercises? I feel that especially these tabletop what if scenarios can be easily tied to testing in general. But I don't know if you had any kind of exposure in that.
Yeah. So we personally do this manually right now. So this is something that we are like all of our a lot of our like critical tests on the application side have been automated. We're still using PyTest. But like as far as our infrastructure and all that is concerned, a lot of it's manual. A lot of it is, including some of our security as well. I've done some security in the past where we've automated some of it, OWASP, ZAP specifically. But with the infrastructure side, that's still a work in progress. And what we're doing right now is, we might be building something out, whether that's like at the moment it's a Elastic Kubernetes service and Amazon Web Services. So that's something we're building out right now. So to really test out this stuff, we're doing it manually, and particularly here it's going to be like horizontal pod scale auto scaling, and maybe even like vertically pod auto scaling, and really just testing out those limits, because you hear horror stories about these kinds of things, and all the reading and stuff that I do like online, just seeing news articles and all of these things. So to get into the point, it's a lot of it's manual. There is not a game day, but we are keeping track of KPIs where I meet with the VP and founder, and our team of ops folks and SRE folks, and we discuss all the KPIs that are associated. We're still adding these KPIs. It's still fairly new. It's like maybe like the meetings are about 3 months old now, so it's still like super fresh. But some of those are like how many outages do we have? So when we meet, we talk about the outage, and we talk about the postmortem, and like the big thing here is like the blameless postmortem, and that's that's a big deal. If an issue occurs, you want that psychological safety net of people being able to talk about when there's a problem with the system, and that's like a huge deal. So otherwise people could like it's just the reality of things, right? People could like hide the fact there's an issue, or something like that. There needs to be like this real safety net where people can openly discuss when there are problems. And I think that's a huge thing. I know there are some companies that do this and they do a great job at this, but like for us, and it's not necessarily a game day, but it's a day that we meet to discuss issues for that month, problems for that month. How many outages were there? Were there any critical errors? What was the performance on? What was the average performance, I should say, on like the front end of our homepage, things like that, and specific pages and specific business critical services. And there's a lot, and there's maybe too much to add, really. Like if you really kind of sit down and think about all of these things. So yeah, just kind of like once again that context driven approach, kind of find out what works best for your organization, and kind of take it from there. But I would say if you want to, I think it's who's the Gremlin SRE or principal. I think it's Tammy Buto. I believe that's the name, but this person has a lot of articles, a lot of presentations, and it goes very in depth and in detail about chaos engineering and game days and all of those kinds of things. It's just the amount of information there is a lot of is what I use to learn and still learn a lot of this stuff. So definitely check that out. But that's what we do, and then that's a resource to check out to dive even deeper into the stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Evan, this is Mark. I wanted to thank you for mentioning those Kubernetes security tools, because one of the things we're trying to do right now is break our monolith apart into microservices. And part of that is to load pieces or all of it sometimes onto a Kubernetes system. And before we expose that to the world, it would be nice to know, like you said, is the bastion open? That's a bad idea. How effective do you find these tools for scanning and finding things that you didn't even realize were there?
Yeah, so I think there's one of the most effective tools that I used, and like just even getting, just diving into it, right? Like the biggest issue that I've seen with Kubernetes is everyone has this assumption that, it's secure out of the box. They can use it, particularly like on a public cloud, it's secure out of the box, right? It's like, I'm using EKS or I'm using GKE, it's a good example. And it's like, okay, Google, has put massive amounts of effort into this. It's going to be hugely secure. No. Yeah. So one of the biggest tools that I used was like Q benchmark, I believe it's called Q benchmark, something like that, where you run something in your cluster and it really kind of tells you, it gives you an idea as to like where you're at from the security perspective. And of course, like, it's going to be different per organization. And I think that was one of the biggest tools that helped us out. And then one that I'm going to implement is, this one is, I believe I'm still sharing my screen. And this one is not the singer. Although he did that song "Rock Me Amadeus," which is really cool. If everyone wants to check that song out, it's really nice. So check out Sysdig. So there's this person runs the podcast. I think it's the CTO from Sysdig, and it's the podcast is actually, and I'm kind of sidestepping here, but the podcast is cool. It's a cool podcast. Check it out. It's technical, but it also talks about just like the people behind the project, which I thought is pretty awesome. But in any case, Falco project is, it identifies issues within your cluster. So if you have this running in your clusters, there's that zero trust aspect of things, which is like a huge issue that I've seen with Kubernetes clusters. Because if you don't have RBAC and all of these additional things, like you deploy a cluster and then you have to do all of these additional things just from the security perspective, and then you have to keep up with this case security and the container runtime environments and all these kinds of things. So yeah, oftentimes like larger companies will see security teams who just do like cloud native security now. But getting back to Falco here. If there's like some odd commands being run in your cluster or some like, strange anomalies and whatnot, it'll alert you to that. So like, there's your, some buzzword here, but DevSecOps approach to these kinds of things. So yeah, there's some resources there. And then, there's good old curl. There's also these things as well. And just really, or Nmap and, running that against, some of your endpoints and, identifying what you can actually get into and what you can brute force and all of these things. But these are some of the tools that kind of helped me out in my journey so far, and I've yet to find more as well. There are a ton, as well as more, just up and coming, just because the cloud native space is massive. It's just this huge huge space now, and people are competing to get these spots and all these other things. But so that's what helped us out so far and will help us out. And I think the other thing I was going to say here was, I full disclosure, like a friend of mine that I talked to that works at a company called Cruise. That was like, I learned a lot from them because they have a couple blog posts out there just on multi-tenancy and Kubernetes as well. That's worth a read. Medium post. Medium has some good stuff. Wow. That's like has some crazy good reading, but check out Cruise it's like Cruise Automation, I think they're called now. They do the self-driving cars, but they talk about really like, you know, deploying a cluster and then like all of the additional security things that you have to do on top of that to really get that zero trust piece in there. And then another thing, of course, is like, I don't know how you store your secrets in Kubernetes. Like the biggest issue I had going into this, like maybe like a year ago, was, you know, all of our secrets were, you know, they were base 64 on, they were encoded, you know, not encrypted. So, you know, we had a cluster and our secrets were not encrypted in any way, shape or form. Other issues there we had as well, which I can't kind of discuss, but you know, some of the pieces, yeah, but yeah, basically like, we wanted to ensure our secrets were encrypted. We used HashiCorp Vault for that, and still using that on some newer projects. And yeah, that's
how do you spell the cruise thing you just mentioned?
So the cruise is a cruise automotive, like medium Kubernetes, I think. Yeah, here it is. So building a oh wow, this person, Carl Eisenberg, this person has written quite a bit. And so there's this, and then there's like, I would just like go to engineering, and then there's a lot of security stuff that this person wrote about. And I think the biggest one for me that kind of like made me realize like a lot of some of the problems that we had to solve for are on the security piece. And that would just, yeah, I would search for this plus security. I'll find the link and post it within the media page, and then I'll post some other resources primarily on like the base64 encoding and like encryption versus encryption and all of these things.
Looks like you might have it right there as bullet point number 2, container platform security.
Let's see.
Because he says it's part of the same series.
Oh yeah, this is actually one of the readings. Yeah, so this is something to check out. Yeah, awesome. But yeah, there's all of these which I'll post to the meetup page, and then yeah, those are all the things that have helped us out so far. And I'm sure there will be more things to help us out too.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Evan. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.